To understand the conflict between the Sunnis and the Shias, you have to go back almost 1500 years ago to 632 AD. The prophet of the Islamic faith, Muhammad, has just died, and the Muslim people must choose a new religious leader, a caliph. This dilemma broke the Muslim people into two groups, the Sunni and the Shia. The Sunnis make up more than 90% of the Muslim population in Saudi Arabia and are usually part of the middle or upper class. They elected Abu Bakr, a community leader who will continue their prosperity and was elected by his fellow Muslims. The Shias make up more than 90% of the Muslim population in Iran and are usually very poor. They choose Ali Talib, Muhammad's cousin, as they wanted a family member of Muhammad to be the new caliph. Being poor, the Shia believed in a religious leader who will be able to support them through hard times, and that the caliph should be chosen through family lineage. The Sunnis prevailed, and Abu Bakr was chosen as the first caliph. Umar Khattab was chosen as the second caliph after Bakr's death, and Uthman Affan as the third caliph, which were both Sunnis. Finally, Ali Talib was chosen as the fourth caliph. Violence soon broke out after Ali Talib was chosen as the new caliph. Ali was later assassinated while praying at the great mosque of Kufa by Ibn Muljam, and the second and third caliphs were murdered. Ali's son, Hussein, rejected the fifth caliph and was decapitated during a battle with the Sunnis. This marked the end of violence, which led to a period of turmoil between the two branches.
Sunni versus Shia present. By the year 2003, Iraq was becoming a proxy war scene, and the US had invaded Iraq, overthrowing Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Iraq. Neither Iran or Saudi Arabia liked this, since Iraq was acting as a buffer zone between the two nations. The US couldn't replace Hussein, and then armed militia began to take over power in the nation. Sunni and Shia militia groups sprang up all over the place, and many were radical Islamic groups that were seeking power amidst all the chaos. The Saudis started sending money and weapons to the Sunni militia groups, while Iran was sending money and weapons to the Shia militia groups. Iraq was then a proxy war region, with Saudi Arabia and Iran supporting opposite sides. This continued throughout the Arab Spring in 2011, which was a series of anti-monarchy and pro-democracy protests. Both of these nations were getting involved in countries like Libya, Lebanon, and Morocco. As more pressure was added to the situation, the nations began to collapse. The situation has escalated when both countries deployed their own militaries. In Yemen, Saudi Arabia is supporting the militia against a rebel group called the Houthi, backed by Iran. In Syria, the opposite is occurring, with Iran fighting with the Syrian militia against rebel Sunni groups backed by Saudi Arabia. The wars in the Middle East keep growing, with new wars and new groups becoming involved, and this Cold War is very unpredictable and escalating quickly.
The threat of nuclear weapons will bring in more countries from the United Nations to help defuse the conflict. First world countries will have to get involved to reduce the risk of the mutual destruction of countries or terrorist attacks on the countries involved. In the year 2030, nuclear weapons from Iran and the continued participation from other countries will continue to play the conflict between the Sunnis and the Shias. The uncovering of a stockpile of enriched uranium and centrifuges show that Iran is willing to defy its nuclear agreement with the United Nations. This means that there will be a threat of a nuclear attack between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
It is reasonable to infer that the Sunni are going to continue to be backed by Saudi Arabia, and the Shia will be backed by Iran. As the war and conflict escalates, more and more groups and nations will become involved. Once the conflict becomes big enough, first world nations, such as the US, will become really involved in the fighting and the battles. If the US were to become involved in fighting in the Middle East, then there would likely be more terrorist attacks on US soil by the Sunni or Shia extremist groups. This is very well could escalate so much that it brings in enough nations that makes this war even bigger and could start a very large war all throughout the Middle East, and not just in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, and Syria.